Hello, Happy New Year, and welcome back to the week that really was for 2024. My name is John McGurk. I am the editor of Gript Media and your weekly regular host of this podcast, along with my dear friend and colleague, Sarah Ryan. Sarah, Happy New Year. How are you?
Happy New Year. I'm good. How are you?
I am grand. I am avoiding New Year's resolutions like the plague, because I think nobody ever keeps them. I remember about 10 years ago, I decided I'd make some New Year's resolutions. And you know the way January is the most miserable month of the year anyway, because
Mm-hmm.
it goes on forever. And by about the second week, you're just hankering for the paycheck. And you've got another 14 days to go on 50 quid. Thankfully, life has improved a little bit since those days. But I think for a lot of people, January is a miserable month. And the weather is crap. And then loads of people decide to make it even more miserable for themselves. So I my couple of years ago I decided no New Year's resolutions for me. If I need to fix myself, I'll do it in March or April or sometime like that. What about you? What are you giving up?
I don't really do like resolutions as such. But I'm one of these weird people who loves New Year. Like I love the feeling of a new start, and I kind of write out things I want to do. And
That's fascinating. I hate New Year.
yeah, no, I don't like New Year's Eve. So, well, this year actually we went out, and then one of my kids started. My parents agreed to babysit because they don't really ever do anything on New Year's Eve. And then at 10 o'clock, my mum started texting me saying one of them had a roaring temperature and he's vomiting everywhere. So we were home by 11:30.
I see. I see.
I know, but no, it's not about New Year's Eve. I just love the feeling of a new year and planning out the year and thinking about things I want to do. And I'm into that kind of side of it. But I agree that I've grown out of the, starting this and giving up that. Most of the vices that I used to think about or talk about before, I don't have anymore because I have 3 kids and I, don't go out. Keith and I do dry January every year. I don't think that's any harm. After probably not a particularly boozy December, but definitely more boozy than any other month I would have, you know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, everybody goes on an exercise regime and a diet and all that. What about you?
Not me. I don't have to do that. I can see my secret is. Do you believe this? I've lost 4 inches off my waist in the last 4 months. I've done it without lifting a finger.
I don't think anyone's going to be shocked that I know the answer to this already, but go on.
Yeah, because I've been on this wonder drug called Ozempic. You're the one that Oprah Winfrey is on.
And by the way, Oprah Winfrey is on it, and someone else, me.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Am I not the one who told you about it in the first place?
You are. Couple of months ago, Sarah told me about this drug called Ozempic that you could get. And I went to my doctor, and because I have an underlying medical condition, he was like, "Oh yes, that would be suitable for you. Since I tried to tell you to lose weight now for 15 years and you've not done it, why don't you try this?" He said. And I said, "Well, is it one of those things now where you have to take it and it there's a little bit of writing at the bottom that says it works well with exercise or whatever?" He said, "No, just try it." So I tried it. And to be honest with you, I don't really feel very different. Like I wouldn't say my diet has changed significantly. My appetite has definitely reduced. My natural appetite. Sometimes when people say that your appetite reduces, you kind of imagine, oh, does he feel sick after eating? No, I just naturally don't feel like I naturally I now am leaving food on my plate and not feeling like I want to eat it. Not like it would sicken me if I did. Just that I don't want that. And it's a perfectly natural feeling. It doesn't feel any bit weird. So I'd say I'm eating less. But yeah, it's been miraculous for me so far. And
it's kind of controversial, isn't it? Like, I mean, this Oprah came out, and I was kind of shocked that Oprah came out and admitted she was on it and said that she was privileged to be alive in a time where this was available to her, and she'd spent her whole life struggling with her weight, and now she didn't. And my thing about this is, what I find interesting about it is that, so I've had 3 children, and, after I had my first child, pretty much not a bother, a couple of months later, bounce back, or not bounce back, but lost the weight from having a baby. Used to be a demon for the walking after having a baby, be gone, like no problem. Second baby, much, much, much more difficult, slower, whatever. And then after a couple of years, like I just kept feeling like no matter what I did, it's 2 more pounds, 2 more pounds. And like you know what I mean? I just couldn't. And I went to an endocrinologist and they said, yeah, like, kind of on the border of diabetic and whatever. And like ultimately, when I started taking Ozempic about a year and a half ago, or a year and a bit, I did like change things considerably in the sense that like I felt like I suddenly got the metabolism that I deserved, if you know what I mean. So like I started like going back to walking. I mean, Malahide, like I'm surprised I didn't have to re-tarmac Malahide. I walked so much. And I think like I've lost about like 5 stone or something.
I don't know how much I've lost because I refuse to keep a scales in the house.
Yeah.
Just refuse to do it because my wife does not need to lose weight. She's always had a phenomenal figure, though I say so myself. Even though it's really all her work. And her weight is kind of stable. And I refuse to do it because my weight has always bounced around within a range,
Yeah.
And it's depressing if you monitor it because you don't. Sometimes it seems to bounce up and down without me doing anything.
But also, as you get to thing about Ozempic, and that's why a lot of people are going towards it now, is because as you get older, it's just not the same. It's not as easy. It goes up and up and up, and you can't. You know what I mean? And I know people will say it's calories in, calories out, whatever. Yeah, okay, for sure. That's true to a point. But the other thing is that like if you and myself and 10 other people are all put on an island next month and we're, all given the exact same weight, like 6 months later, some people will have lost 5 stone and some people will have lost 1 stone. And if you're losing 1 pound by only eating a month, by only eating, the minimum calories and doing everything you can, and it's not working because your metabolism and your age and hormonal levels for women and different things, it's very soul destroying. And I think that like, the health benefits of losing weight and not having these, like this stress on your organs or whatever is tremendous. So I'm all for it. But I think there's a huge amount of, I said this to you before, like psychology caught up in how we feel about weight. And we're, people who are, like I've lost a lot of weight, but like I was never, I'm 5'10", I was never huge or anything. But like, I think that people who are very overweight, like suffer a lot in a lot of ways, like in terms of like, being dismissed by healthcare for other things and being just told everything is about their weight. Society is meaner to them. There's loads of ways in which like being overweight impacts your life. And so now there's this drug that's helping a huge amount of people. And I mean, like, honest to God, like the shortages, the people who are on it. I mean, like the amount of people I know who are on Ozempic is practically at the level that I know more people who are on Ozempic now than who aren't.
And hardly anyone talks about it. This is the thing.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I don't care who knows because I mean, I really don't think it makes a difference.
But I know people, and this is the thing, and this is the reason why I'm happy to say it, is because I've said to people, like I say I do a pickup, for example, of my kids from a Montessori or an after school or whatever. And I've had women say to me, oh, do you mind me asking, like, what have you been doing? Because you've lost so much weight. And I'll just say, oh, well, I walk and I also went to a gym and like did a lot of like weight training or whatever, but also I'm on Ozempic. And they'd be like, what's that? Like, I've never heard of that. And one of them in particular was like to me, oh, I go walking with a group of women and they're all losing so much weight from the walking and I'm not losing any weight and I don't understand. And I said, oh, I'll try Ozempic. And then she came back to me a couple of days later and said, oh, I said it to the women I go walking with and every single one of them is on Ozempic. And I was like, yeah. Like none of them would tell you. And it's just so mean, like to find this thing that's like really working for you and then to be just like, no, it's just calories in, calories out. Bullshit. This is like weird passive aggressive games that some women play with each other. It's awful. Like if you're struggling to lose weight and you're trying everything, and listen, John, by the way, as well, like I went to an endocrinologist because I was doing so much to try and lose weight and like so much exercise and nothing was shifting. And like, fairly dismissed by the endocrinologist, to be perfectly honest. And she was like, oh, it's just like, let's talk about, like calories in, calories out. And I was like, no, but I'm weighing my chicken fillets and I'm doing an hour of cycling a day and I'm doing this and it's not really, I'm losing 1 pound here and there. Like, I used to not be like this. Something has changed. She wouldn't listen. But like, ultimately, like there's a kind of there's a gift that you can give people, like, that will change their lives. I don't understand why you wouldn't just be honest and tell people. If you're listening to this podcast and you've been trying and you know yourself, if you're honest with yourself, if you're eating a Chinese at 10 o'clock every night, well, that's why you're not losing weight. But if you're genuinely trying and you can't shift the weight, like, go to the doctor and ask them about it. Because, like, the health implications of losing that weight are greater than anything else. And like, pretending like you have to, like, there's, that it's just all you is unfair. And like, I don't understand why people aren't honest about it. I worked my ass off to lose loads of weight, but I was helped by a drug that I strongly encourage anybody else who's working their ass off with no results to try.
Well, I haven't worked my ass off at all. I've done absolutely nothing except inject myself once a week. What?
You're a disgrace. You should be doing that.
Well, this is what I'm going to talk about, because there's one thing I can't stand. It's Puritanism. I hate Puritanism. And one of the reasons we do this podcast is because we live in a state that is kind of dominated by progressive Puritanism. But there are other forms of Puritanism. There's cycling Puritanism. You ever try criticizing a cyclist in this country?
Yes.
Oh, good Lord.
I had to block, and I never block really on Twitter. I had to block like 10 people one day because I jokingly made something about a cyclist. I was like, Jesus, guys.
No, they don't take it well at all. Because they die, don't you know? I mean, they're really vulnerable on their bikes. And look, I sympathize. And I actually, they make a lot of good points. They just make them with an intensity that is sometimes off-putting. But before we get the cyclists on our back to the podcast, the other kind of Puritanism is, of course, health Puritanism.
Yeah.
And it's out there. And there are a lot of people who engage in it, and there are a lot of people who kind of, and I have been, like you, I'm tall, I'm 6'4", and because of that, people who are sympathetic always told me through my life, oh, you carry it well, you carry the weight well.
Yeah.
But there was never any dispute that the weight was there. I'm one of those people. I've never been a naturally athletic person. I was shit at sports in school. Couldn't do it. I remember it was kind of half decent GA goalkeeper till I was about 16, and then I had an awful incident in the match, let in an awful goal, and just kind of said, look, this isn't for me. I'm wasting my time. And I've never really found a sport that I'm naturally good at, or kind of things that I'm good at don't require a lot of exercise, like, driving as well. You can kind of do them without. So every bit of exercise I've ever done in my life has been deliberately self-inflicted, deliberately miserable. I hate it. So anytime I've tried dieting before, I've crash dieted. I've tried the intermittent fasting thing. Remember years ago, I think I was after a bad breakup or something in my 20s, and I tried. There used to be these things. I don't know if you can still get them. It was basically the sachet diet you can get from the chemist.
Oh, lipo trim. Oh, I did that.
I did.
Where you eat no food except the sachets. I did. Do you know that Keith still tells people when we're at dinner parties about how his kind of bizarre admiration for me, like, he couldn't get over the fact that I ate no solid food for like 50 days in a row and lost 24 pounds on those disgusting sachets, to the point, John, where even if I taste a strawberry milkshake now, it gives me PTSD.
Yeah, I did that too. And I lost 2 or 3 stone.
Yeah, so did I.
And then as soon as I came off it, went straight back on again.
I know. I think I lost 2 stone. And that restaurant in town, Fade Street Social, it had like just opened.
Yes.
And it was so nice. And I literally went in there and I think I gained all of it back in one night because like I couldn't stop eating because I hadn't eaten in weeks and weeks. Like, no food. Keith used to look at me and be like, how are you doing this?
Well, it's funny. I don't know if you found this, but after about the first 3 weeks, it became kind of natural. The difficulty was not the no food. The difficulty was it was no calories, so you couldn't drink alcohol either.
Yeah, and also you realize how much of your day it's taken up by eating. It's so boring.
Yeah, but that's the other thing. Yeah, you realize you have absolutely nothing to look forward to apart from a milkshake at 5 o'clock.
But the thing is, as well, about the diets and stuff, John, is that the thing is that there's different types of people, and I was one of those people that these things all worked. Like, I could get away. Like, when people talk about health puritanism and it's just calories in and it's just this and it's just that. Yeah, I know, because I used to be one of those people. Like, I used to be able to just drink and then go to Charlie's Chinese on the way home and be the same all the time because I was young and whatever. But as you get older, your metabolism changes. And then one day, especially when I started having kids, I one day wasn't. And the things that I used to do to lose weight before just stopped working.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I was like, I don't understand calories. Why am I gaining weight? Your metabolism changes. Like, you change. And there's a lot of people out there who are like that. That's why you see women in particular putting on weight, especially around the middle, as they get older and older. And this drug is literally for that.
Yeah.
And so Puritans, like a huge amount of Puritanism, like around health or whatever, is rarely like being dispensed by people who, like, or is most of the time, in my opinion, being dispensed by people who are naturally slim.
That, and also people who have overcome weight challenges and engaged in a body transformation. People who have done the weighing their chicken and eating their granola in the morning with cold water, wherever it is they do, and gone to the gym for 3 hours a day every week for 6 months and emerged the other side. And their attitude is, I did this through hard work, grit, and determination. And if you can't do the same, then you're a weak person. And some of those, I think, those are the people I've encountered who, when I tell them I'm using Ozempic, they're the most skeptical about it. And I think partially that's psychological, because they're thinking, well, that's just not fair. And it's not fair. But also you make your choices. I mean, I have suffered from being overweight. You get abuse. You kind of do have, everyone who's overweight suffers these moments where you look in the mirror, particularly if you're going to an event, and you're like, Christ almighty, I'm a show. That does happen. And I've always been a person who has a relatively high level of self-confidence and self-esteem, but even I have suffered those moments down through the years. I used to never be able to look at myself on TV because like I would be seeing all the things that were wrong with me.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a cost to every choice you make. But in this case, I have to say, I just think we should marvel at the wonders of science, that so far this drug, which is helping millions of people around the world, and has had, I mean, there are side effects. I've noticed that I drink less water. I've also noticed that I burp. I used to be never somebody who burped, and now I'm burping all the time, which is sort of an unpleasant side effect, but it's better than being fat, or as fat as I was. And I think you've had other side effects as well. So, but like it's there's nothing concerning.
I mean, I also, like, on the positive side, like, I have 3 small kids. Like, my energy level to run around after the kids is massively increased. You know what I mean? The like health implications for anyone losing weight off their like fat off their organs, etc., is huge. So, I mean, I think people are right to be skeptical about anything, but I think that weight is, as the years have gone on, and we're talking about different diets and things that have been Atkins and things that have been in fashion or whatever. I remember I saw an interview, and it's actually a really interesting question, which we should come back to. But it was Jordan Peterson being asked, what were you wrong about? And he said, in all your talks and for the last 10 years, you've been traveling around it. And he was asked, like, what do you think you were wrong about? And he said, I was wrong about weight and people and the interface, the psychological elements, how difficult it is for some people to lose weight over others, the psychological reasons why people don't eat, blah, blah, blah. He was like, I was wrong about that. I thought it was a black and white issue, and it's not. And so I think that a drug that will help a lot of people won't help everyone, but I think it's something that, people should talk about, be honest about. And, like, obviously, new year, new you, go for walks, like this, you know what I mean? Like, get out and about. Like, your cardiovascular health isn't going to be improved just by Ozempic, but your overall health, if you're overweight, will be. There's no doubt about that.
I don't want to pretend, by the way, that I'm some kind of couch potato who just sits here all day and does nothing. I do walk the dog twice a day, and I do get out and about. And I have these little robins in my garden that come and eat out of my hands. I'm out and about in the fresh air during the day, but that's all more from mental health than physical health. I've never been. Something
I really noticed when I got older, because I really like the walking thing. Like, the improvement to your state of mind is unbelievable. Even if it did nothing now.
Yeah, I often find that just going out for a stroll. I mean, because in my job, I'm producing like 10 articles. I'm writing 8,000 words a week for Gript, which is, if ever you see a spelling mistake, leave me the hell alone, right? 8,000 words a week. There's going to be a mistake in there at least once. I don't have a full-time sub-editor, so. But there are days when that is a struggle to think of things to write or to think of things to talk about. And I find going out for a walk really, really helps. One of those days, because we need to do one of my world famous segues, was on Monday of this week when I was thinking about things to write and I couldn't think of anything. And then I thought, what I'll do? And I think we should repeat it on this podcast. Some predictions politically and culturally for the year to come. So I published mine on Monday. People can find them on the Gript website if they search for predictions. Sarah, did you read them? Did you agree or disagree? And do you have any of your own?
Yeah, so I read yours, right? First of all, that you think Biden will be re-elected.
I do.
I don't. Talk me through that.
Well, I think it's going to be, normally they say governments don't lose elections. So oppositions don't win elections. Governments lose them. Have I mangled that? I got that right. Yeah. Oppositions don't win elections. Governments lose them. And Biden has done everything you could possibly hope to lose this election. Number one, he's kind of quite clearly suffering from, if not formal dementia, then certainly what we might politely describe as a certain degree of mental slowing down with age. His economy is terrible. He's got crime crisis on his southern border. He's got all those things. But the Republicans are putting him up against somebody who kind of matches him disaster for disaster and problem for problem. Biden's old and slowed down a bit. Have you seen Donald Trump lately? I'm sorry. You cannot put a video of Donald Trump from 2016 up against a video of Donald Trump from 2024 or 2023, probably the most recent time he's videoed, and tell me that is a man at the same level of cognitive ability. He's slowed down. He's making flubs. And one of the things that's happened, he's been kicked off Twitter. So most people aren't seeing the Donald Trump that's there now. If you go and look at his Truth Social page, it's all rants about the 2020 election and corrupt Democrats. And it's what used to be about kind of, at the last election, it was build the wall, fix trade, deal with China. Now it's a kind of weird revenge tour of undo the rigged election, abolish the FBI. These kind of weird swamp obsessions of a nearly 80-year-old man. He's got criminal issues going out the gazoo. Whether you think those are fair or unfair, and we could talk about that, the cows come home, they're realistic, and there's a realistic chance he'll be convicted in at least one of them. And what's more, he's run for election twice, and on both occasions he's gotten 46% of the vote and no higher than that, which is not enough to win. He won by an absolute fluke of the Electoral College in 2016, having lost the popular vote by 1.5 million or something like that. And then he lost it by, I think, 8 million in 2020, if you believe the results. I happen to do. I know other people don't, but that's not enough to win. So the Republicans are putting up a historically weak candidate whose number one ability the last time he was in the election was to drive Democrats to the polls rather than Republicans. And, they're not putting up somebody like Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis, who is basically a blank slate. You can say, here's Joe Biden or a new person. Instead, it's Joe Biden or the old guy who you got rid of. I think that is a catastrophic error of judgment. And I think by the end of the year, if the economy is picking up a little bit, which I think it will, because the inflation crisis seems to be easing across most of the world. I'm not saying I want this outcome, but I think the most likely one is that Biden, who will have far more money to spend than Donald Trump, and a much more organized get out the vote operation, because Trump basically tells people only vote on election day, don't vote by mail, don't vote by post. I think we'll get basically the same result as we did the last time. Add to the fact, before I keep talking, Donald Trump is historically weak in states Republicans have to win. He's historically weak in Arizona, he's historically weak in Georgia, and he's historically weak in Wisconsin. And you can't win the election if you're a Republican without sweeping those three states. I would be, lots of things can happen. You make predictions because sometimes they're wrong, right? If I get them all right by the end of the year, that'll be amazing. But I don't see it happening.
I think everything you've said there is, fair and true. I just think that there's a lot to play for between now and then. And I think that the story around why to vote for Biden if you're American is dwindling by the day. And I think that, it's still to play for very much.
Well, the thing is, just on that, if they nominate literally anybody else, and I mean literally anybody, Chris Christie, even that Ramaswamy, whatever his name is, guy. There's no reason to there's no reason to vote for Biden, because there's no compelling reason to vote against the Republican nominee. If they put Trump up, then the reason to vote for Biden becomes keep Trump out. And do not tell me that like there are loads of liberals in America and indeed here in Ireland who are very disillusioned with Joe Biden and probably not that keen on seeing him re-elected. But if that question becomes, do you want Trump back in, then the Biden side of the equation goes out the window and they're all right back on Team Joe.
What I'm noticing, like there's a few random people on Instagram and stuff like that, women in particular, who I follow for different, like, and I'm talking about like, one is a interior designs account and one is something else. And they both in the last couple of months, I've been really struck by the fact that both of them have put up posts talking about how they literally can't believe they're saying this, but they're leaning towards Trump. And if you actually go back in their feeds to, 4 years ago or whatever, they were Biden people. And they're like, one of them was like giving out her reasons. And she was like, we're now, there was no wars, economy was better, things were better under Trump. It was better to be this, better to be that, crime was better. And they're laying it all at the feet of Biden. So I don't know.
My point to you is they'd also vote for any other Republican candidate other than Biden, because their problem is with Joe Biden. And I'm not saying those women won't vote for Trump. And I'm not saying Trump definitely won't win. I'm saying I had to put my house on it right now, which is the point of making predictions at the start of the year. I think Biden will scrape over the line. I don't think it'll be a landslide or anything like that, but I think it'll probably be something close to a repeat of the 2020 election. Same candidates. The only thing that's changed is one of them is now the president and one of them now isn't. They've reversed roles, but we'll see.
I suppose it's more that I admire your certainty, if you know what I mean.
Well, I think the biggest reason I'm certain is that the guy has run for president twice before, and on both occasions he's gotten basically the exact same percentage of the vote, 46%. And by the way, if you look at the opinion polls in the US, he's not over 46% in almost any of them. His average share of the vote, it's not that Biden is losing 54-42. He's losing 46-42. There's a big chunk of votes out there who didn't vote for Trump last time, voted for Biden last time. The question is, which way are they going to go? You say there are a couple of them who are going to go to Trump, maybe. I think a lot of them will come home to Biden if that's the choice they're given. And I think they're given literally any other choice, they go with the new guy.
Yeah. Well, it's more, I just admire your certainty, really.
Well, look, we'll have a podcast, I'm sure, the Thursday after America votes, and you can hark back to this one. And if you're right, then I can be dunked upon. And there will be lots of people in the YouTube comments very annoyed at my prediction on this. And they can, all I'll say is stick with me till November. And if I'm wrong, then, give me the kicking you're going to delight in giving everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be an interesting year for us, this podcast, because it's going to be busy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of elections. Your one of your other predictions is that either Leo or Micheál will not survive the year as leaders of their party. I'd say that there's a possibility that it'll be both.
Yeah, I'm actually less certain about this one. I was trying to think because I said they were going to be bold predictions. I didn't want to be like predicting sort of like easy stuff like Sinn Féin will gain 20 seats in the local election. I wanted to make predictions that were kind of like, what are things that could happen this year that you mightn't think. I mean, the problem, obviously, we've talked about this on the podcast before. Fianna Fáil don't have anyone to replace Micheál Martin with. Like, who is there? And I don't only mean about somebody who I know you like, but if Jim O'Callaghan's the answer to that question, then Micheál Martin's going to have to be in a lot of trouble. That's what I think there. Leo Varadkar, on the other hand, there are, between Pascal Donoghue, Simon Harris, Simon Coveney in a pinch, even I would argue the person who they probably should think of appointing, Heather Humphreys, they've got a bench. And I think if Leo keeps making flubs, and he's a very bad man for making flubs, and they have a bad local elections, and I think they're going to have a bad local elections. I think there could be people in Fine Gael who say, look, this guy hasn't actually won an election since we appointed him leader. And our vote has declined in every election since he became leader, because that's true. I mean, and the reason he was elected in the first place as leader over somebody like Simon Coveney was that he's from Dublin, he's from Castleknock, he's got an appeal, he'll do well with urban voters. Basically, every sort of idea people had about Leo Varadkar's electoral performance when he was elected leader of Fine Gael has not panned out.
And he's completely changed his ideological position, so even people who liked him don't.
I remember being, I hand on heart, I was delighted when he was appointed leader. I thought, okay, yeah, he's not going to be the kind of radical reforming Leo of his youth. I mean, office is going to moderate him a little bit, but he's still a guy who thinks about things, who has ideas about politics, who wants to reform the state. He has been a catastrophe in office, a catastrophe, and not just purely in ideological terms. Just, I mean, what has he actually achieved? There's a scene in Yes Minister. I don't know if you ever watched Yes Minister, where Jim Hacker is asked by a school child in his kitchen, what have you actually achieved in politics? And he thinks for it and he goes, well, I became a member of the cabinet. And I think Leo's answer is, well, I became Taoiseach. What has he actually achieved? And anyway, it's not personal dislike. I knew him a little bit when we were in university together, and I'd met him a couple of occasions and social occasions. He's a perfectly pleasant fellow, nice guy, no difficulty with him on that front, nothing personal. I just think he's been a terrible leader. And I think a lot of people in Fine Gael privately will tell you he's been a terrible leader. And I think at some point he's at real risk of getting the boot.
Yeah. I mean, I think Micheál's less likely to get the boot than to go off in some other job. You know what I mean? Because, that's would be more in his style. But I think there's a good chance that neither of them be there.
Well, with him, with Micheál, I get the impression that Fianna Fáil no longer exists as anything other than a vehicle for Micheál Martin's career. In that, there's...
Did it ever exist as anything other than a vehicle for Micheál's career?
Well, before he became leader, it existed for other purposes. But in its current kind of state, I mean, traditionally, political parties, they make an effort to promote talent from within for their own survival sake. So if you look at Sinn Féin, for example, if and I say a genuinely, God forbid, a meteorite came down tomorrow and knocked Mary Lou off out of her career, they've got Pierce Doherty, they've got the lad who's always on about housing, what's his name, Owen O'Brien. They've got the lady out your direction. What's her name?
Louise Riley.
Yeah, they've got a lot of people who could credibly, in a pinch, step into that job. As I said, Fine Gael people. The Labour Party, for all their woes, have probably at least 3 potential leaders on their front bench. Who would Fianna Fáil have, and who has he promoted? Except for
the Labour Party, for all their woes, have a number of people on their front bench that could be leader, except for their actual leader.
Yes, yeah, very true. But yeah, I like Micheál.
By the way, actually, I will tell you offline. But somebody stopped Keith in the street recently, who is quite a senior member of that party, and said that I said that they were listening to our podcast. It was very mean to them. So if it's you, you know who you are if you're listening, and sorry about that. I just disagree with everything you think.
Oh well, I don't think that's fair. I mean, we've been very praiseworthy of. Sorry, I'm terrible with names of TDs today, but Duncan, what's his name?
Well, Duncan Smith is a super good, like, he's my local TD, and he's a really good TD. He's actually everything that a TD should be. He's smart, he's local, but not too local, if you know what I mean. He's not like a super councillor. Like, he's a good TD, he's a good parliamentarian. He's a family guy. He's of the area. Like, I mean, ideologically, I disagree with him on loads of things, but I think he's a really good TD. I also always thought that Alan Kelly was a really good TD. I don't think that Ivana Bacik is a good leader for Labour at all. I think it's been an unmitigated disaster. I think that they thought replacing Alan Kelly with a woman who was from Dublin was, and by the way, on paper, that all sounds like a great idea. I mean, when you talk about Fianna Fáil, people are always saying, oh, they need a Dublin leader. And people get these notions about what parties do and don't need in terms of their leader. So I think on paper, they come up with this yarn that Ivana Bacik seemed like a great idea for the leader. But I don't think that I'm alone. I think the numbers speak for themselves, and that it's been a bust.
Yeah, and I think it was always going to be a bust because, I mean, there's being from Dublin, and then there's been the Reid Professor of Criminal Law in Trinity College Dublin, which I'm sorry, does not endear you. Endear you is the wrong word. Doesn't naturally make you a fit for large swathes of Dublin. I mean, that they have a leader who's suited to sort of coffee bars on Dawson Street. That's what they
And
are.
also, and I don't say this, like, I really don't mean this to be disrespectful, but because I think that there's different types of people and there's different types of politicians. And I think that some people are really, really, really suited to be really good senators and who talk about, issues and more national issues and, kind of themes and bigger issues. And some people are better at being a TD and more local, you know what I mean? And I think she's more suited to the Senate. That's my personal view. I really don't mean that in any kind of disrespectful way. I just think that, she's a broad thinker. She's interested in certain things. And I think she did well in that by-election because she was of a moment and they got, all a bit overexcited. But ultimately, I think Alan Kelly is a superior leader.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about that. Just look at the opinion polls. But anyway, yes, so that was the reason I think either Leo or Micheál may not survive the year. I mean, the government is shaping up. The government could have an awful year. It could lose 2 referendums. I think it will. I'm not certain about that, but I think on balance it will. It's one of the things people don't appreciate about the local elections, and one of the things that people should know about the local elections is people have to forget that Sinn Féin had a terrible day in the last local elections in, I think, 2019. That was because things in politics happen quickly. People forget that the Sinn Féin surge in the run-up to the 2020 general election was kind of unexpected and came out of nowhere, and really started with somebody in Fine Gael planning to honour the black and tans. Do you remember that? But before that, literally the year before, when we had local and European elections, I don't have the percentage to hand that they got, but they had a really disappointing election. They polled in the low teens, if they even made it to the teens. And they didn't win a lot of seats. So if they come back, even on a below average Sinn Féin day in May, they're going to double their vote based on the last local elections, and they're going to gain a boatload of seats, which, even if they don't do particularly well, is going to make it look like the government got a kick. That's the other thing about the local and European elections. They're probably going to gain seats in the European Parliament as well, I would think.
I've heard anecdotally that they kind of literally went kind of door to door and like tried to really reconnect with the electorate and figure out what had gone wrong there. Mm-hmm. And so, I'd say that they've learned their lesson. It's a pity. It's a real pity that other parties haven't taken that lead. You know what I mean? And try to reconnect, because I think that some of the government parties are going to have a terrible day. So, and that's a shame for the people who are actually going out and canvassing for them and working their asses off to try and get elected, and will just get washed away. But yeah, I mean, I we'll see. But I think you're right. I think that the government is going to have a bad year.
Also, bear in mind, do you think there could be a general election this year? I mean, our last general election was in 2020, and it was early in the year. I can't remember the exact date, but wasn't it sort of January or February of 2020?
I think there could be a general election around November.
Yeah, I think there could indeed be a general election around November, and that could come in the aftermath of 2 referendum defeats, thumping in the local and European elections. And because one of the things is narratives build, and a big day for Sinn Féin, the local and European elections, is going to sort of psychologically prepare a lot of people for the possibility that Sinn Féin could be in government. Now that could go one of 2 ways. It could scare the electorate, or it could make Sinn Féin less scary to the electorate. So yeah, I think there could be a general election before we do this year's predictions thing again next year, and it could be a big political year. Yeah,
I mean, I think what will happen, what I would say is, I think that the government could get absolutely hockeyed in the referendum, and I think that result could spook them, and then we roll into the local elections 2 months. Is it 2 months later?
March, April, May, June, about 3 months later.
And so, yeah, I think there's a number of things there that could, scare the horses or whatever. But overall, I don't think it's going to be a good year. And to be honest, did you see this thing last week where it was it Roderick O'Gorman saying that NGOs will have to give a good reason why they're not supporting the referendum?
It was bizarre.
So I think that kind of statement makes me hope they get hockeyed. Like, the arrogance of that. Like, you've left the resolution in arrogance and your lack of connection with the electorate to make a statement like that? Is that a threat?
Well, he is now a cancer on the government's political fortunes. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I mean, the thing about Roderick O'Gorman is that if you listen to him speak, he kind of sounds, he's very good at sounding sort of moderate and responsible. He is, without a shadow of a doubt, to my mind, the most extreme member of the cabinet in terms of his actual views. And somebody said to me during the week, it's bizarre that over the last two governments, Fine Gael, who've been the common denominator in both, have allowed the most extreme member of the cabinet on both occasions to take the Department for Children. So we have Catherine Zappone, and I've got Roderick O'Gorman. And I mean, he is behind an awful lot of the stuff that is causing the government real political problems on the ground. He is responsible for immigration policy and immigration housing, which is causing ructions at local levels up and down the country. He's responsible for large parts of sort of like the various library book issues that we're hearing and seeing about. And now he's taking these referendums on and basically telling NGOs that they have to support them or else, with a tone that implied nice state funding you have there, pity if something happened to it.
By the way, I think a lot of those NGOs are a nonsense, and that's a kind of a conversation for another day. But just the fact that you would say that, and think that that's an appropriate thing for a government minister to say in advance of a referendum is shocking.
Especially since, and bear this in mind, this is one of the things that really gets my goat. We obviously have the McKenna judgment in the country, which effectively means, for those who don't know what the McKenna judgment says, the McKenna judgment says that the government cannot spend public money to advocate political positions. So, in other words, it cannot. The government can't run a campaign out of the Department of Taoiseach saying vote yes in the referendums. If that doesn't, people get confused on this. Sometimes during referendums, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil put up posters, and people say, I always get emails from people when that happens, kind of going, I thought the McKenna judgment forbade that. No, that's their own money. That's Fianna Fáil's and Fine Gael's money. They're not allowed to spend public money, but they are. And we've seen this happen over the last couple of referenda. Taxpayer-funded NGOs campaigning. Now, officially, those NGOs say we're not spending the public money, we're spending money raised from donations, but they're only able to campaign because they're funded by the government. They have full-time staff who are funded by the government. They have campaigns officers funded by the government. So there's a whole constitutional issue there as well, which I really would like some court to take a look at some stage. So like you, I don't give a hoot about the NGOs. I hope there's a row between the government and the NGOs. I hope that they have big falling out and somebody vindictively decides to slash funding to some of these organisations. Because A, it'll be a political scandal, but B, it'll be in a good cause. But that aside, I mean, what an outrageous thing to say. Basically, support us or else. That was the tone of it. Whether he'll say that's not what he meant, but that was the tone of it. It was unmistakable. And I haven't heard anyone who heard his comments take it any other way.
And also, like, is there anybody out there who could mention or could let us know? Like, does he not have PR people and people who are paid salary to help him manage his media message? And if not, and if he does, they knew well what they were saying. Do you know what I mean? Or if he does, which I'm sure he does, they know what they're saying when they write a message like that. That didn't get through a filter.
Yeah, and by the way, all of these things we're talking about are connected because there's the referendums and then there is local and European elections. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael do not want to spend the money that they have saved up for the local and European elections on two pointless referenda. They are relying on posters. I mean, they'll use them in one sense, in that you will find Fine Gael candidates for the council and Fianna Fáil candidates from the council around the country sticking up posters with their faces massive on them with a small vote yes at the bottom as an excuse to put up posters and build their name recognition. Be a little bit of that. But they don't want to spend a lot of money actually promoting referendums, and they're hoping that the National Women's Council will lead the campaign on the women's issue. And they're hoping that somebody else will lead the campaign on redefining the family or whatever it is. And if that doesn't happen, then they could have quite an anemic yes campaign. So they're hugely relying on the NGOs to fill the gap in getting this over the line.
And I think that people, the Irish electorate are just looking, for an excuse to give the government a kick. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they'll use this referendum because it's so beige and, that they barely understand it themselves. It's just not really interesting. There's not a lot in it. You know what I mean? Take the word woman out of the Constitution by people who can't even tell you what a woman is. Brilliant.
Right. What else? What else going to happen this year, Sarah?
You said in your predictions that the hate speech bill will not pass.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay.
This is one of those ones where people will hope I was wrong about Trump. They're going to hope I'm right about this one. And if I'm wrong about both, God help me. I don't think it will. Look, I think Senate is a huge issue. I think people have forgotten two things about this. Number one, Sinn Féin flipped their position on this. It is no longer in Sinn Féin's interest for this bill to pass. Both because the issues, the immigration issue is causing problems for the government. They don't want to be seen to be siding with the government on that. They're going to back off on immigration in a big way and start sending mixed messages. So when they're in the Sunday Business Post talking to the middle classes, they will talk about combating the threat of the far right. And when they're in the Daily Mirror and the Sun and the Star talking to a more sort of populist audience, they will talk about how we're not in favor of open borders and all that sort of stuff. Sinn Féin will do that. And they won't support the hate speech bill. And you also have people like Fianna Fáil Senator Lisa Chambers, who has said she cannot vote for the hate speech bill in its current format. And you have loads of government backbench TDs who don't want to vote for this thing with a general election coming up because they don't want to give voters yet another reason to be annoyed at them. And by the way, last point, is being pushed by the most unpopular minister in the cabinet, in Helen McEntee. And there was a poll before Christmas showing she's not as unpopular as people think. Maybe she's not. She's still the most unpopular minister in the cabinet. In a year that is going to be presumably have its own fair share of justice issues, and a year in which she's under huge pressure to sort of focus back on the core law and order part of her portfolio and get away from all that kind of culture war bullshit. So yeah, I think, I mean, they probably had a window to pass the hate speech bill like in the week after the riot in Dublin, and they didn't take it. Barring another riot in Dublin, which I don't think is massively likely, I just don't see where there's going to be a window in the legislative calendar where the government think, what's sensible now to spend a week talking about is a week talking about our hate speech bill again. So, and as I said, referendum, election, possible general election, I just don't see where they fit it in.
Well, that's it. I mean, I obviously hope you're right. I think it's like, it's a good take. I feel like they have kind of nailed themselves to this so much and talked about it themselves and talked it up and talked it down and talked about it and brought it back into the middle of the kind of political awareness after those riots, that it's very difficult for them to drop it. But I hope you're right. I mean, it'd be great. It'd be a win. It might just, skulk off into the back when other events take over. But I just feel like they've got it in their sights, and they're, they'll struggle to be seen. They don't like what it will look like to let it go away. But we also have media that are incredibly kind to government and who just won't bring it up.
Yeah, there'll be no flack for not passing it. There'll be some flack from the aforementioned NGOs, but even they will have a lot on their plates this year. I mean, the one thing that might change that is is if these asylum centres keep mysteriously going on fire. That is the one wild card I didn't really consider, and that is an unfortunate turn of events that has started to happen recently. And
many times has it happened? Three
in the last week, if you count the one in Tipperary, which I don't really know what the situation was there at all. So that's a new wrinkle in there. But I mean, look, I don't know what a hate crime bill is going to do there on the basis that
those crimes are already well covered.
Yes, they're already crimes. Number one, and number two, thus far no arrests have been made in respect of any of them. That's not to preclude the possibility that there may be arrests next week on Garda Síochána move at their own pace, but in tight-knit communities where crimes of this this nature happen, it can be very, very difficult to get witnesses. That's not an endorsement of that. That's just the reality. Yeah. It's and plus, I mean, these crimes are wrong. They shouldn't happen, but they're happening for a reason, which is that there are a lot of communities who are increasingly desperate as a result of government policy. And responding to that desperation with, well, now we're going to crack down even harder with the hate speech bill is just bad politics, in my view. So
yeah,
we'll see.
We will see. I mean, like I said, I hope you're right and it goes away. But I think that there's an arrogance there, and there's a kind of there's there's a real deep sense of being on the right, and I mean correct, morally superior side of everything by this government, that they'll push it ahead because they think that they're doing something good. And that shows in the way Roderick O'Gorman has the confidence to make that statement about the referendum, and it shows in hundreds of other ways in which the government interact, act, talk, and push certain legislative amendments and even referenda forward. Like they think that they're right. They think that they're doing good work for the people of Ireland, and I fundamentally, not on everything obviously, but I fundamentally disagree with that. And if you think that you're doing something that will save lives and block bad people from gaining power and all of the things that they think this hate speech does, I don't see why you just drop it.
Yeah, but the other thing is that they've shifted emphasis as well. This is the other reason why I made that prediction. They have shifted emphasis away from sort of regulating people's speech to regulating media and media platforms. And that, I mean, first of all, I think it was Roderick O'Gorman who said this week that the first priority for the new year was media funding, putting the media on a sustainable footing. Then you've got Commission de Man flexing its regulatory powers in quite a clever way initially by saying it wants to restrict access to pornography in Ireland by making everyone hand over their passports to Pornhub. If they want to look at nudie pictures, as Father Jack would say. And there's this constant talk about regulating social media platforms. Basically, rather than implement a hate speech bill, they'll just force Facebook and Twitter and other platforms to silence anyone who says anything out of line. That's the other angle they're coming at it with, which is sort of doesn't agitate people as much for whatever reason, because everyone thinks that they're immune to misinformation and it's only somebody else who's reading it and doesn't impact them. Whereas the hate speech bill provides a direct threat to the public. So I think there'll be a shift in emphasis much more towards this kind of social media regulation approach rather than criminalizing fellas for sending dodgy WhatsApps.
Well, we'll see. But I mean, listen, I admire the spirit of putting your predictions out there, John, right? Because, as we know, people will love to remind you later that...
Yeah, you love to remind me later.
I know, but
you're going to give me a kicking.
I do it from I'm coming from a good place.
Yeah.
But
if anyone wants encouragement on the presidential election prediction, if you're really upset with my Trump prediction, please be aware that I have been wrong about, I think, 5 of 6 of the last presidential elections.
I think American elections, when you don't live in America, are unbelievably difficult to call, because I think that you have to have an unbelievably good grasp of the electoral college and, the state by state. And, anybody who's been to America, I'm sure would agree. It's about 5 years ago now, I spent a bit of time in Montana, but then also Boston. And you might as well be in 2 completely different countries.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Montana is infinitely the superior of the two.
Obviously, stunning. One of the nicest places I've ever been, I think. But you know what I mean? It's a hard one to call. And we live in a country where our media is unbelievably biased towards the Democrats, and so what you're hearing is always a very skewed view of the reality on the ground in America. And
you're not going to figure out American politics.
The ground, there's 100 grounds. You know what I mean?
You're not going to figure out American politics by reading Maureen Dowd's column in the Irish Times when it makes an appearance this year, as Will does every election cycle. Yeah. Or reading what Fintan O'Toole says. I mean, they're coming at it from... I will never forget, one of my favourite Irish Times front pages of all time, in fairness, and Donald Trump gave this to me, was the front page they published on the day after the presidential election in 2016. And I don't want to quote it verbatim, but I have it somewhere on my Facebook. I must pull it up and share it at some stage this year, because it really is the most hilarious thing I've ever seen. It was like there had been a level 9 earthquake in Donnybrook. Yeah. That was the kind of scale of the disaster coverage. This was it was incredible. I think they and that I still think is at the root of much of our current problems. I think all this social media regulation, all this hate speech stuff, all this regulation of speech, it's all the Western liberal psyche has never recovered from 2016, Brexit and Donald Trump, and they're determined that it will never happen again.
Yeah. How do we create more and more, either legal or kind of societal infrastructure to make sure that we can not listen to other people, because and the moral superiority over people who disagree with us is unbelievable. But John, like I don't think that a huge amount of people are buying into that as much anymore.
No, they're not.
This podcast is that like never ceases to amaze me. I was going out over Christmas and on two different occasions, and I was getting my hair done one time and then something else, and both two separate kind of beautician type women, and both of them said to me, I listened. Is that your podcast? I listen to that podcast. I love that podcast. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of that. I'm sick of the media. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of that. Like that's significant. Do you know what I mean? That's people who are like, there's a groundswell of people who are just not buying what they're being spoon fed anymore.
Yeah, it's funny. Ben Scanlon has a video out today. We're recording this as ever, by the way, on Thursday, the 4th of January, going out Friday the 5th. Ben Scanlon has a video out today where Leo Varadkar had said over Christmas. He said that I think he basically described the Dublin Convention, which states, for those who don't know, that somebody who's claiming asylum in Europe has to claim it in the first EU country that they arrive in. And Leo Varadkar had described this as fake news in really exaggerated terms. And Ben has a video where he just plays him saying this, and then he plays like 4 or 5 Fine Gael TDs over the last 3 years saying the exact same thing that Taoiseach has just said is fake news. Like, there's a lot.
Also, I think that, I'll check this, but I'm almost positive that is the law.
It is. Now, I have no doubt that Leo Varadkar, if challenged on this, will point to some technicality about how he was saying that it's actually they have to claim asylum in the first country, but they don't have to stay in the first country. So he'll have some basis for wiggling it out, but the intent of what he was trying to convey was very, very clear. Anyway, the video can be found on Gript's TikTok if you want to have a look at it. But there's a lot of people who are seeing through it. I mean, because it really is, we've reached the point with this government, with much of the progressive establishment in Ireland, where it is literally Orwellian. It is one day you wake up and Oceania has always been at war with East Asia, even though we were at war with Eurasia yesterday. And that is that is the thing that people keep saying to me. You say people over Christmas didn't necessarily mention the podcast to me, but a lot of people came back to me with, I think it was the episode before Christmas or a previous episode where I had said that a definition of being far right these days is believing exactly what our politicians believed 10 years ago.
Oh, like 10 years ago. Sometimes, John, 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Honest to God, I said that to somebody over in my family over Christmas. I was like, sorry, because obviously I come from a political family and we do have strong political conversations over wine and whatnot. And I was like, literally, I was being criticized around this table for saying things 6 months ago that Micheál Martin and Leo Varadkar are saying this week.
Yep.
I mean, like, it's not even like, and I told you so. It's just kind of irritating.
Yeah, I know. Well, look, your dad listens to us, and my life's ambition is to turn Owen Ryan, former Liberal, Fianna Fáil TD from Dublin South East, into a paid-up member of the hated far right. So
I think you'll be waiting.
I know, but it's important to shoot for the moon.
Yeah.
There's no point having mild ambitions. Anyway, we're grateful that he listens, and he's a great man. But we're up on an hour, so I think we'll leave the people alone. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, I said to you earlier on that one of my New Year's resolutions, actually, I did make one, was to read more books. And I'm reading Prophet Song, which is the Paul Lynch book that won the Booker Prize. And it is a book about Ireland in falling apart and it being in the grip of a government that has turned towards tyranny and is kidnapping people off the street if they speak.
Wait. Have you and I won in this book? am I the Taoiseach / dictator? Am I locking up all the?
Well, the thing is that, like, what I'm kind of surprised by is, like, I'm 100 odd pages in, and it doesn't really say what the ideological position yet is of this tyrannical government, so you don't really know. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting. It's interesting. It's not a kind of a book that I would have thought would win a Booker Prize, just because it's about that kind of, it's a kind of a political book, but it's interesting. I will keep you updated. If it turns into a kind of a, oh my God, the far right took over and now everything's gone wrong, I'll throw it at the wall. And
So give us the name and the author again. It is, what did you say it was called?
Called Prophet Song, by Paul Lynch. It's based in Ireland and it won the Booker Prize 2023. And I think it's the first time an Irish writer has won the Booker Prize for a very long time, if not ever.
Okay, well, let us know. Give us an update next week when you're another 30% in. And
my New Year's resolution is going really well, and that I've lost the book somewhere in the house and stopped reading.
I am a very bad reader. I read about 4 or 5 pages of a book every night before I go to sleep, kind of as my thing of putting me to sleep. I used to be read an awful lot more than I do now, but I'm also, of Sarah and I, listeners should know, I am by far the more lowbrow person. She is a person of high culture and class. I, by contrast, over Christmas, sat down on my TV looking for things to flick through, and I went back to a show, the first episode of which I'd watched last year and thought was a bit rubbish. And I said, you know what, I'm going to give this a second chance. And it's called Slow Horses, and it's on Apple TV. And it stars Gary Oldman as sort of a British spy of the old school, but set in the modern world. And the series is spellbindingly good. I mean, just like, I'm so glad I went back and gave it a second chance, because the first episode, a bit dodgy, but the remainder of it, really, really good. So it's basically, it's based on the series of books by, I think the guy's name is Heron, who wrote them. And I'm sorry, I can't give a better plug than that. But if you look up Slow Horses books, anyway, so each TV series is based on one of the books. So I've now watched 3 TV series, so I'm not going to go read those books, even though that's probably a Philistine thing to do. I'm just going on to the ones that I haven't seen the TV series of, and they're tremendously rollicking fun, but they're not in any way highbrow. So that's what I'm reading.
Cowboys, or what is it?
It's spies. The guy is kind of, he writes like it's set in the basic idea is the Slow Horses refers to this idea that there are some MI5 agents who make a mess of their careers and get sent off to this place called Slough House, where their job is to rifle through people's bins and do all the crap work, and they get stuck there for the rest of their careers under a massively grumpy old dinosaur by the name of Jackson Lamb, who's a spy from the Cold War. But the plotting is excellent. It's very much like, if anyone's ever read, and if you haven't, you really should. Now I'm going a bit highbrow. John le Carré's stuff. It's a kind of a modern version of that, and there are actually several callbacks to George Smiley and all those spy who come in from the Cold books. It's really entertaining, but it's not in any way expanding one's cultural horizons. It's just a bit of entertainment before bed, really. So,
well, I might give it a go, but you see, then if I start doing that, then I'll probably read less, and I'm really trying not to do that. So
you're actually probably better just watch TV series, because TV series takes less time. You can do it in the evening, and it's really good. So that's my big TV recommendation at the start of the year.
Okay, good one.
All right, we will leave that there for this week. The first of probably 51 episodes of this podcast this year. We hope you enjoyed it. We will be back next week. Until then, that was the week that really was.